Start very quickly with, first of all, adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Next is our chair's report and district manager's report. It will be very short because we have a lot to cover. I just want to make two announcements. One, the Budget and Strategy Committee under Roberta will be requesting the first 25 minutes of your committee meetings in December to lay out plans for the coming cycle. Appreciate if you get in touch with her. She will, I'm sure, be reaching out to each committee. This is an early morning. Please make sure that that happens and is incorporated into your planning. Just based on something I'll get into later if we have time, based on a meeting that Doug and I attended this morning. I just want to remind committees to please make sure that when you actually allow time for any members of the public or your committee to raise new issues. We've been trying to get the public to attend our committee meetings. We've had feedback that they feel not necessarily as welcome as they would like. And these measures will help ensure that we get better attendance and better input from our community members at that meeting. So I appreciate that. Let me first turn to Max for his district manager update.
Sure, very quick. First, thank you to all the co-chairs and executive committee members that attended last night's meeting. We got a lot of positive feedback that CB7 really jumped to, and it was well received that so many of you went to that. So thank you. And then secondly, for those of you that are going to be having resolutions, please start to send them in soon because we did have full board kind of midway through this month. So full board is just after Thanksgiving break coming up. So we'll need those resolutions as quickly as possible. And that's my report.
Okay. I'm going to start off the discussion of our bylaws. This will be the third time we, I think, address some of these. And I apologize for those who feel that they've already gotten to the point where they have heard this too many times, but I think a number of your colleagues felt they wanted more time. The first thing I would like to do is to invite our guest, Valerie Mason, who is on Zoom, who is the chair of Committee Board 8 right across the park. She has in her district a very successful public members initiative, and I asked her to come and explain why that's been a positive for her district. Valerie?
Okay, thanks for having me, CB7. It's so close across the park and yet so far, but I'm very delighted to be here with you. I also am happy to hear that we're not the only one who requests resolutions as fast as possible from our board members, so I'll take that back. That it happens in CB7 too. So Beverly asked me to talk a little bit about public members. I joined Community Board 8 in 2017, and we've had public members for a very, very long time. Not every committee has a public member. I don't know if you're familiar with our bylaws, but essentially public members are appointed by the chair in the chair's discretion. A committee can have no more than 2 public members unless mandated by law, but I don't see how that would happen. But anyway, it goes committee by committee, and most notably, I think what we concentrate on is some kind of technical expertise, something to do specifically with the subject matter of the committee, and or perhaps some geographic representation within the district that is lacking for whatever reason. In my tenure, I haven't seen anyone really appointed for geographic representation, but we have done it for either technical expertise or expertise in the subject matter. For example, in our Youth Education and Libraries Committee, from time to time, we've had public members who have actually children at various ages in the public schools, in the school system that perhaps community board members don't have, so that we can get a very real-time representation. For instance, what families are facing in terms of high school admissions in schools and things of that nature. In terms of another area where we have public members is on our Landmarks Committee, where we have people who've had experience, either architects or people experience with various aspects of architecture, et cetera, that we feel are helpful. The other thing we're really looking to do in terms of our public members going forward really has more to do with term limits on community boards, and how we will retain our sort of rolling off expertise in another way. Many of our board members, and I'm sure it's the same is true in CB7, have been on the board for 25 plus years, and there's an institutional memory that hasn't been committed to paper and or some electronic file yet, that is really important in terms of the continuity for positions, people who remember resolutions that were done many years ago, that we want to make sure that we have a thoughtful transition as we move to this term limits, because I don't think really anyone knows what the full ramifications of that are going to be. So we haven't appointed any new public members based on that, but I think we see that as a real tool going forward, in order to retain, again, expertise in the areas, and also just continuity of what our positions have been on various issues. And so that's really, and the only thing I wanted to say is, up until about a year and a half ago, our public members could vote within the committee, but their vote was sort of segregated, if you will, and didn't really count towards breaking any ties. But we've changed that to make their vote count in terms of the regular committee vote. And we just asterisk the name and just say that was a public member. The other thing we actually have been using the public members for fairly effectively is to use it to give people an opportunity to see what it's like to be on the board and see if that's something that they're willing to commit to. We had 2 public members this year who applied for full membership, if you will. They did not get it on the first round, but then we had a quick resignation from appointed members, and we were happy to say that one of our long-term public members is now back on the board full time. So, and that was from our Landmarks Committee, which I was very excited to see again, to talk about this continuity thing, about moving people through the system. And also, I think public membership, if you have somebody who's coming to meetings regularly and is developing the expertise, I think it's sort of a not a reward, but just an acknowledgement that this person has been regularly attending meetings and is engaged, and you want to keep that momentum moving forward. So that's pretty much what I have to say, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Are there any questions for Valerie?
Thanks for coming, Valerie. One concern that was raised when we discussed this last time was the public members counting towards quorum and that being an issue. Has that been an issue for you in terms of?
No. Interestingly enough, I'm happy to say that there's been a lot of interaction amongst board chairs in Manhattan, and we're sharing our experiences. We I think have been pretty lucky in terms of our quorum counts. We haven't been counting the public members as members of I think they do actually count for quorum in the small meetings, but it's never really been an issue. And in our board in our district, every community member. Every community board member is a member of any committee that they want to go to. So you can show up for any meeting you want to. And I apologize, I didn't read your bylaws before I came to this evening, but we really don't have that issue. But I would think, if we're giving somebody a vote in the committee, then they're counting towards the quorum. Our position really is that, and that's sort of towards moving them to full status in terms of voting in the committee, that they are putting in the time and they are entitled to that vote. So.
If I could just add a couple things. We were told that by two different borough presidents that public members count for the quorum. But just to set things straight, when we had public members a long time ago, if a non-member attended 3 meetings of a committee, they could automatically become a public member. And this created a lot of problems because someone might have attended 3 transportation meetings and then become a public member, and then came to the 4th one, but skipped the next 4. And if the quorum was at 8 people, then you needed 5 for the quorum, and you might have just messed the quorum up.
Well, that's why what we've drafted.
It's very different. I just wanted to say that.
I remember that.
What we had before was not working.
Okay. Any last thoughts for Valerie before we thank her and say goodbye? Unless she wants to stay and listen to our.
Well, I don't know. I am kind of fascinated by other people's meetings, but I do. But I think I'll come to a different meeting. I mean, I'd love to come to your next meeting on the 96th Street bus route. And maybe we can have some joint meetings on that, because not to throw you off topic, but I've been getting reports that the traffic is worse than ever. So I'm wondering if that's your experience on the west side as well, because maybe we need to revisit this together. And I'm
hearing that as well, Valerie.
Well, okay. So, and also, not for anything, while I have your attention, I apologize, Beverly, I'm just going to put a couple of items out there. We also understand that there was the Central Park Conservancy just released their report on the paths, and we are also very concerned about that as well. We're not we're sort of not sure where we want to be on the use of e-bikes in the past. So we'd be very interested in working together with you all on sort of those related issues. So just put that out there.
We're trying to arrange for the Conservancy to come to a joint meeting of parks and transportation in order to present the details so we can get a full discussion.
Okay, great. That would be great. Let us know about that. All right, everyone. If I don't see you before Thanksgiving, have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. And I'm interested to hear where you guys come out on this, Beverly, at the Borough Board. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay. So Valerie is one of about half dozen of the borough of the chairs that I meet with at our Borough Board regularly on a monthly basis that have these programs in place. They're different from district to district, but I think the consensus of those who have the programs is that they're real beneficial, both in attracting new members who are then knowledgeable about what goes on in the board and therefore more likely to become, if they apply for full membership, more likely to become valued board members than folks who are just doing it with no base of knowledge about what the board does. And also this notion of being able to retain expertise. We've done a very limited task of, or limited framework here of how many and what the controls are, and leaving the committee very much in the driver's seat to assess the effectiveness of the individual member, short 1-year term, and, you know, they have to reapply. So it's, I think, a model that is designed to prevent some of the abuses that I understand took place in the past. Are there comments that folks would like to make on this item before we move into the rest of the bylaws issues? Yeah.
I just want to state that I'm in favor of this. I think you solve the problems of making the public member a quorum and potentially could, you know, run the risk of not having a quorum. And I think it's a great way. They can interview us, we can interview them, and to make sure it's a great fit. So I think you've mitigated the risk. So I'm 100% in favor.
Any further?
Beverly, do you want me to get the share screen up on your document?
If,
Or not yet?
I mean, I did send them out last night, so
Okay.
people may have them fresh in mind.
Okay.
If there is anyone who wants to see the text that we're discussing, we can put it up. So, Seema.
I just have a question. So I attended the training, I think it was last night, about, you know, the
I'm sorry, I
training.
couldn't make it.
It was actually quite good.
That's good. It was really good.
Yeah, but one of the questions this raises to me is, so board members who are rolling off because of term limits, can they become public members? Do they
Yes.
have a blackout period of a year? Or-
Well, I don't think there's a blackout period. It's what we write into the bylaws. I think, though, what we're saying in the way I've drafted this so far, which is obviously mutable because we haven't voted on it, right? Is that the term starts in January. So if somebody rolls off in somewhere between April and June, when their replacement is named, right?
Mhm.
They could apply for the following January. If that's not what the consensus is a good solution. I'm happy to revisit it. Yeah.
I say yes, number over.
Okay, well, remember, we have
Oh,
our own
September,
elections
right.
in
So
October,
that's true.
so we would not want to have it before November,
So
probably.
maybe November.
Shall I change January to November in the next? Is there a sense that that would be better?
Also, it doesn't happen for a year, right?
Sorry,
The way it is now, it doesn't happen
well, if we made it December
That's what I'm saying,
And
that's
passed
where
it.
it makes sense,
and passed it,
if we want to do it.
and passed it in December. We'd be stuck for a year. If we make it January, if we got our act together, we might actually bring some folks in for January.
It makes sense.
Leave it for January,
We can change it.
we can change
We
it,
can always change.
Yeah,
we can always change it.
there's
But
another,
we ought to, for small things like that, we ought to have a more
just,
rapid process.
just a,
Getting bylaws changes in place.
Why don't we?
Can you, Clary, I wanted to.
Yeah, so, first of all, I thought it was very helpful to hear Valerie, and I think Beverly and whoever's worked with you have done a good job of drafting to try to avoid at least some of the concerns we've had the last time, which I spoke at our last meeting. I lived through that, and it wasn't working, at least in the committees. I was, maybe it was time committee, but anyway, it wasn't working. And others last time said the same thing. So I think you've done, as good a job as you could, and Valerie was very helpful. That having been said, nothing has changed my mind about this. What it seems to me, I mean, the reasons, the rationales are theoretically impeccable, but in the real world, things kind of sort themselves out anyway. And what it sounds like to me is roughly analogous to some of these procedures and job titles and whatever that our prior mayor somehow persuaded the voters to vote for in the last charter amendments, and our current mayor persuaded the voters to vote for in the current charter amendments, notwithstanding the opposition of our council people and many others, where you're creating a title and you're creating a process and you're creating an administration, all of which is, in my view, more trouble than it's worth.
Well, I would only say that we don't have the experience to know how much it's worth. And I think what it's worth going forward into the new era of term limits is going to be quite different from what it may have been worth in the recent past, right? Where everything was sort of stable and moved forward, and mostly the same people were around the table, and the expertise was secure and stayed there. That's not going to be the case anymore. So I do think it's in a way a new tool to address essentially something we don't yet have experience with. There.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Sorry, I forgot. Thank you, that's I'll come back to you in a minute.
as a brand new co-chair, we just had a circumstance on the preservation committee where we had a situation that was very similar to something that we had 3 years ago or 2 years ago even. So I think like that institutional knowledge of like, this is how the board dealt with it last time, this is how we'll deal with it this time, was really critical to making us get through the item very quickly and get to the right answer, since a lot of the work had already been done. So I think that like sometimes we talk about like institutional knowledge. Last week, firsthand institutional knowledge was critical. So I think this would be really helpful.
Right.
Just back to the point of having the months that zone in the bylaws. In my experience, albeit limited, having bylaws written to be too specific can create complications in the past, and it's difficult to change over time. So unless there's like a set reason for why it needs to be a certain month, I would keep it more vague to be.
Yeah.
At the
Okay,
as they decided.
so I will simply take that out and say it's a one-year appointment.
Smart.
Yeah.
No problem. Anybody object to that?
No,
Makes sense.
yeah.
Okay, easy to do. Let me Steve, you had something you wanted to say. Let me finish with the folks on the committee and we'll get to you. Go ahead.
Oh, I think Daria was ahead of me.
Oh, Daria,
Sorry.
sorry.
I just wanted to say that the difference between now and before, when we had this experience in the board, were the term limits that you mentioned. And in the past, the people who were, there was a shortage of folks who would want to attend these meetings because the people weren't necessarily asked to leave the board itself. So there's going to be, once they leave the board, this is a way for them to kind of participate again in the meetings, and that's not the case in the past. In the past, you could stay indefinitely on the board, and there was really no folks that could, that would want to participate unless they're just folks that want to be on the board. But now we have people who are going to be forced off the board through term limits who still want to participate on the board. And there may be a good chance for them to do it in certain committees where that expertise is needed. And then you also have a chance to be able to where institutional knowledge is not as important to recruit new members. So I'm completely in favor of that, just because the difference this time around is the term limits.
First, Doug, and then Shelley.
So I'm generally in support of this. I like the idea of reaching out more to the community. The more voices, the better. So I'm generally in support. I like the mitigation sort of controls that we have to not let it get run away or any particular committee so I really like what's happening. I will, it was interesting, the speaker from CB8, Valerie said that they have 2 members. Now, I like starting off with 1. I think it's simple, but we have at least 2 or 3 committees that have a very broad subject matter. For example, we just merged recently land use and housing. They're very related, but housing is a giant in and of itself, and of course land use. So, and then even with parks and the environment, which I just heard recently that there's going to be more emphasis on environment, which I love. Another subject matter. So I wonder if any of those committees should have more than 1, or just start at one, just because the subject matter is so broad and so bifurcated. And the other, and to actually speak sort of contrary to what I'm saying is that one of the things that I've been thinking about is that CB7 has been one of the most applied for boards in the entire city. So I don't think we're gonna have a problem people wanting to be on this board. And the way I came on the board is I was just naturally attending meetings that I liked. So on one level, organically, I think we see who shows up. But I'm just putting that out into the ether, but I generally support the idea.
Okay. Shelley,
Okay, so first of all, I think would be better if we make this a pilot program to see how it works for a year or so and then put it in bylaws, because bylaws mean it's the way we function and that's one. On term limits, I think we've always had term limits. If people had no right to be here for any length of time, okay, they could not be reappointed, they could be taken off. In committees, they could be appointed to the committee, taken out of the committee. So the things can change without, having a forced situation. I think, if people want to put it in the bylaws, I guess it's okay, but then it's hard to take out. Okay, then we have to go through all that. Well,
first, I mean, it seems to me our bylaws are completely mute on this subject right now.
right.
I'm not sure, as chair, I have the ability to initiate this program unless it is in the bylaws. And I think there are many who feel that way. So I would say I would prefer to have it in the bylaws. I view the bylaws as something that we do change annually.
Then I'd like to add to the end to be reviewed at the end of a year and evaluated and continued or ceased, to be a bylaw at that. So there is an evaluation process because in the past, we had my committee, we had the greatest public members, okay? And we're very fortunate. Others had problematic people, who came regularly. So I just want to make it so that we have an evaluation,
I think adding language about evaluating the program is fine. I have no
Okay.
problem with that. Yeah. Robert?
Yeah, I just wanted to support actually what Shelley said, and he's changed his mind about it. I think a pilot program is really the way to go with this, and I could support that. I won't support it otherwise. I think and I don't think you put something in the bylaws that is completely, something that we've learned in the past not work. So why not make it a pilot?
But this is not what you had before.
Right.
This
Not
is
the same.
very, very different.
I
very
understand. I understand.
Right. And I think writing in language that the executive committee shall produce an evaluation of the effectiveness of the program after 1 year or after 2 years, whatever seems right, is fine. But I do believe it has to be in the bylaws in order for us to do it at all.
It does.
Any more around the table here?
I just more of like a comment, like I feel like we're hearing just from some other folks' comments, different reasons for why we should do this. Like there's we want to encourage new folks to join us, and there's also we want to have perspectives that are remaining, which feels internally like contradictory. And I think
Complimentary.
well, but it could also be complimentary. Yeah, and I think that's part of the tension, right? I think I imagine part of the reason why we also went toward term limits, and I see your point, Shelley, which I agree with, but is that there's probably an effort to try and get more participation. I know that in this specific community board, that doesn't seem to be an issue, but my concern would just be that if we are, I hear the concern about losing institutional knowledge, but I also think that if there are voices that have been dominant for a long time and they don't leave, and there's this sort of, you're 3 years and then running off in 3 years again, like there's this in perpetuity. I think there's just that concern. I'm not disagreeing.
An individual would have to get the approval of a committee, the committee chairs, and of the chair. So it isn't like we automatically step back on, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
Right, just to add to that, we've had people, for example, Parks and Environment had some environmentalists who've come to meetings who have not been public members, but when you're talking about environmental issues, they have come, they have expertise in the environment, and they have been very helpful. And I'm thinking about transportation. I'm sure when Andrew is term limited, he's,
We're gonna want it.
you're gonna, but I'm sure he's gonna be, I mean, I can't speak for Andrew, but I would imagine that if the committee called on him and said, can you come to a meeting, that he would be willing, just from knowing Andrew for such a long time, that he would be willing to come and share his expertise where he may not want to be a public.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I think you have that option as well, to have, you know, experts that have been on the board, that have institutional memory, who would be willing to come in and say, oh, yeah, you know, 3 years ago, we did thus and such, and this is how it worked.
As
out.
members of the public.
Yeah,
I want to, Steve, you had your hand up a bit ago.
Thanks, Beverly. I had no familiarity with this program having existed CB7. Granted, I've only lived here 42 years. May have been here longer. But as soon as I heard this proposal, I did what I've done for many years. I talked to my neighbors and I asked them what they thought. And uniformly, every one of them thought, boy, that's a good idea. That's a good. And I will tell you that many of my neighbors have less than positive thoughts. And they've shared them with you many times, I'm sure. So it was very pleasing to hear such an enthusiastic response. And I urge you to go forward with this. It is a powerful message from the community board saying, let's have a few more people in the community join with us. So I don't know the guardrails that need to be put in. I'm not familiar, as I said, with the prior history, even though this is not the same. But I urge you to really, really do this. Really do this, because it is messaging. It is messaging to our community in a way that I think has a potential to have lots of good things happen.
Oh, thank you. Are we ready to call the question?
yes.
Beverly, can you just state the latest changes?
As compared to what was last circulated, the
Yes.
one change, two changes. Taking out beginning January 1, and that will be something that we develop a timeline for. Absent the bylaws, I agree that it's probably too detailed for a bylaws item. And then the second one was to amend it to say that the executive committee will evaluate this program and report back after a year on its effectiveness.
Thank you.
Could I just change one? We'll conduct an evaluation. Because it should,
Conduct an evaluation.
yeah, because the executive committee will be responsible for it, but should involve everyone who was involved.
Yeah,
It's just
but somebody's got to do the work.
Right, but that's their conducting the evaluation.
Okay,
Oh,
all in favor,
All committee members.
all committee members in favor. Would somebody do the count? Secretary.
I'm working on that.
Okay, all opposed?
0, seeing 0.
Any abstentions? Okay, non-committee members? All in favor?
2.
2.
Hey, Beverly.
all opposed? Yes.
Beverly, this is Natasha. I hope you got my vote. I had voted in favor.
Okay, we'll add you to the list, then it's 14.
Why is she not on camera? She may have it turned off.
Oh, okay.
14 to 0 to
There
0.
we go. She is.
Hi, sorry.
Hey there, sorry, we didn't see you. We do now. So 2 in favor of the non-committee members, any opposed?
2.
2 opposed. Any abstentions from non-committee members? No. Okay. Thank you, onward. Removing the section on excused absence, we kind of reached an agreement, I thought, a month ago at steering, but I'd like to get that into a vote as well. So removing the language regarding excused absence for all the reasons we got last. Would anyone like to add to that? Any conversation, or I think we beat it to death.
Could you repeat what it defaults to now? It's under, it's.
It defaults
it's
to,
president's,
it defaults to, in order to remain in good standing, a maximum of 6 absences between committee and full board in the course of a 12-month period. Plus the ability to request a waiver for extraordinary circumstances or handicapping situations that are permanent or temporary.
Thank you.
Which means that you do have to be here most of the time, or on Zoom if you need to be. I think it also is an encouragement to be an active member, which is what I felt was very important and kind of undermined by this clause that really didn't have a lot of meaning. Are we ready to call the question?
Yes.
Second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Committee members?
Committee members? Natasha, say yes.
14.
All opposed?
0.
Any abstentions?
0.
Non-committee members, all in favor?
4.
4. Any opposed or abstentions? No, that's it. Okay. Defining present at full board meeting is meaning present at the roll call, where the roll call is subject to be scheduled on the agenda at a time that makes sense for that particular agenda, at the discretion of the chair. Again, any discussion needed? We sort of were okay on this. All right, ready to vote? Call the question.
Yeah, call the question.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Committee members?
Natasha's 14 again.
So that'll be 14. All opposed? 0. All abstentions? 0.
And
Good question. We've had a couple people come in after the roll call.
From now, once we pass this, if you come in after the roll call vote, you're not present. In other
You
words,
can't vote
you can't vote.
and you're marked absent.
Right.
And you're marked absent.
Can we make
Even if you're stuck on a train.
Yeah,
I
we
leave my
had this
office on the
conversation.
train and I get stuck, so I can't email you and tell you that I'm stuck.
There's always gonna be.
There's always gonna be something, that's why you get
Roll call's not
success.
first thing
That's not
either.
first thing.
It
No,
doesn't have to be the first
we've
thing, it
placed-
could be towards the end of the agenda.
In recent months, as we've been sort of
Before
experimenting with
the
this
vote,
idea,
exactly.
we've put the roll call at the beginning of the business session.
Correct.
Because that's when you're gonna have to vote. And if you're not there to vote, that's what your role is as a board member to participate in, and then you're not there.
And being there would also include people on Zoom.
On Zoom, as long as they have a waiver.
Yeah.
The start of the business session is typically how long after the advertised beginning of the meeting?
We usually allot 20 minutes.
No,
No.
An hour or more.
It is,
Usually an hour.
so you could be an hour late and still make the roll call, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you can estimate when the roll call is because the agenda, which has time estimates for the items on it, right? Will have the roll call, in a place so that you can figure out what your slack is on a given meeting. The one thing that is specific in the language that we've inserted is that when you have a election of officers before the start of that election process, before the initiation of the voting process by the election committee chair, that's when the roll call will be.
Elizabeth has a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, if in the event that a future chair decides to change the order between the business session and like when the elected officials speak and so forth, like that usually was a buffer, right? I think in many cases, it does a disservice to those of us who are board members to have to sit through an hour's worth of elected officials.
But we don't do that anymore. They've been so good.
They've been good. They've been good. I'm just saying that there have been times in the past.
We've reached out to them over and.
No,
over
and
again, and they're.
trust me, I
they're
like, I'm
3 minutes, they know
I'm
it.
super familiar with this from my time. My point is just that, for instance, if there's a very controversial item that's coming on the agenda that's going to involve a lot of board discussion and debate. Sometimes, at least when I was chair, we wanted to have those items discussed at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
When people were mentally
Right.
focused and fresh. If that is the case, how are these bylaws impacted? Because
I think that's something for future chairs to figure
Okay.
out, frankly. I also think that we have gotten huge positive feedback from our community by having the public session up front. And that would be something we sacrificed if we flipped it back.
We always did.
it's not
That
the
was
pub,
something we did pre.
Yeah.
well, but the public session, a lot of times we did have the elected officials, we experimented with it, we often alternated and had the public officials speak at the end of the meeting rather than at the beginning.
What we've been.
Because what
trying
they
to
do is they come and they speak and then they leave. And then
What
it's
we've been-
8 o'clock at night before we start.
What we've been trying to do, well, first of all, most of our meetings for full board are now ending around 9 o'clock. right?
Totally. This is not an indictment of you or like.
Which is great, I think, for most people. But we've been trying to do members of the public
Right.
and then elected officials.
Yes.
But at a degree, we're trying to also be collaborative with the public officials whose time may be very, very limited. So we will accommodate them if they particularly ask for it. Yeah. Seema.
I just wanted to say, this discussion aside, like, we're all still expected to be there at 6:30 at the start of the meeting.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we can take a test to see if we're mentally fresh.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
Clarification? Okay, so in the past, if you weren't present at the meeting, half hour after the meeting began, you were marked late. What happens now? Can you arrive an hour after the meeting starts, presuming the roll call has not yet begun, and still just be marked present and?
No, you'd be marked late. Late is different from.
What's the consequence of being late? Other than you missed the elected officials.
Other than it's noted on your attendance that you were late.
Right, but what's the consequence?
You get an L.
All right, well, that's.
You get an L, not an A.
So there is none.
No,
Can we call the question on this? Because I
just to
think
clarify,
we're beating it to death.
the roll call does not determine how you're recorded for the meeting in terms of what time you show up. That's correct, right?
What do you mean?
No, so I think the point is like, how would you record someone being like late?
You put it in parentheses next to their name.
Yeah.
But if you showed up, I'm just saying, I think your point was, if you show up at 7:30, roll call hasn't happened, I vote present, then I would be marked. How would anyone know that I'm late? So I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. So
You'll be marked late.
that's what I'm saying is that the roll call is not when you are marked present.
Correct.
Yes, so that's how you would know.
But-
'Cause
I'm not buying it.
No, the
Yeah,
way,
when you're marked present.
Yeah, it is.
The roll call.
Who's
The roll
monitoring
call
this?
is when you are.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to beat this, but who's monitoring who walks in and what time they get there?
Yeah.
Is there a timekeeper?
The secretary.
So the secretary monitor, so you guys record what time everybody arrives?
No.
No.
If anyone came in last month, for example, during those minutes, even though I was not physically present, I had gone back and watched the video up until I would start the Zoom. And anyone that was late was marked in parentheses as late. Anyone that was present at the start of the roll call was marked. Anyone that was there and on time, and also roll call was just marked on time. Anyone that was absent was absent.
Okay, so that's amazing.
Okay.
But sorry, one more question though. What is the consequence? of
Yeah, I'm
being
with
late?
Josh.
That's what I'd like to
Well,
know.
I suppose if you're late every time,
What happens?
they won't get
Nothing.
reappointed.
Yeah, it's a reflection.
Okay.
it's a reflection on you
But
and.
you still would,
And we give that attendance sheet to the borough president, so
that's-
they
well,
will
that's-
see that you were late every time.
but you still didn't, but you missed no meetings, you were just late, you didn't miss 6. You missed none.
But if you
were
were
like,
always late, and the borough,
I'm just
it's up to
asking.
the borough president's
Right,
discretion.
and then they may request that we provide further
Sure, okay.
information in a case like that. and we
But,
would.
but I have a follow-up question, if I may. I know you don't want to beat it. Why don't we just take the roll call at the beginning of the meeting? If you don't get to vote, you don't get to vote.
The late trains.
Right.
Well, we're grown.
Always
the trains, huh?
Not a work commitment or something?
When you're a kid, you gotta be at school on time. You
work.
take the
But
train,
this is what
you
we're
know you gotta take
volunteers.
the train
I
that gives you an
think
extra.
there are a number of reasons why it makes sense to have a roll call. What we need is a point to determine present or absence. That we are lacking now, and it has made life for our co-secretaries hell. And we want to fix that.
Well, this could
It's
be
also,
it.
you
This
can't
could be
vote.
it.
If I come in, if you take the roll call and I'm 5 minutes after the roll call, I can sit there, but my vote's not gonna count.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know that, so I'm gonna.
You're gonna make it.
And I wanna vote. I
And
wanna be there.
any future chair can put the roll call wherever they want. My feeling personally is that having it before the business session is by and large a good place right now. And maybe we'll experiment with moving it.
Yeah.
And the only specific in this statute is what happens around an election.
Also, like, just in looking at some past minutes too, there wasn't an overabundance of folks that are coming late. It's only a handful that were previously marked by past secretaries. So
Probably the same people every time.
Right.
that's
what
well,
I started.
that's
But then that's a known fact by
Right, no, no, just.
everyone looking at the data.
I think it's good, I was just.
Can
just
we-
another consequence, that's all.
Call the question, please.
Yes, call the question.
Second,
We did.
okay.
We already did, we already voted.
We did the board
did the vote.
members, we didn't do the non.
Oh,
Correct.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
I don't know if anyone changed after
On
that.
the previous item.
And that's when we got sidetracked. I'm sorry. Non-board members in favor?
So,
So that's everyone?
yeah.
Okay. All right, I'd like to skip on to 5 because I think the discussion will be lengthier around the new position that has been recommended. So the modification to elections section, the one thing that there was some sort of back and forth and discomfort around when we met a month ago was the item about curing ballots. In light of that conversation, I withdrew that with the notion that we would put together a group to create a better ballot.
Yeah.
And that would largely mitigate this issue. I've had communication from one board member who couldn't be here tonight, that would not be enough. They think that there should be the ability to cure a ballot that is being marked as invalid for whatever reason, and that should be something that an individual has a right to do. I'm not sure I agree with that, but there is that point of view among some on our board. So just putting that forth, happy to take whatever point of view this group feels they want to support. Roberta.
I think if we write a ballot that's clear and easy to understand, and if you should be to cure it, and it should be a ballot, and we should test the ballot out ahead of time.
Right, and maybe we even give people with their name on it, so you can't.
We've
forget-
done that.
Yeah.
We
You
have
can't-
done that.
You
We-
can't forget to put it
we
in
have
because it's
done that.
already there.
We have done that at prior elections, where we printed the name on the back, on the
blank side.
on the black, on this side. And then this side would be where you fill out your ballot.
And we've also had them, which if a second or third ballot is required or is necessary, there's a place right on there that you check off, so people
Right.
don't have to write it in themselves.
Right, so I think.
Printed, yeah.
Well, the problem was nobody expected 3 ballots, that was. the
But
problem.
we've done
Yeah,
that, so.
so I think a design group, if
Yes.
anyone wants to participate
I
in being a
volunteer.
ballot designer, we will put together such a group to map. And certainly well in time for, our next election. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with our present ballots. They thought they were entirely clear. I thought Natasha's instructions were entirely clear. And if people got it wrong, it's because they weren't paying attention. And I don't think they deserve to have their ballots done a second time. So I'm not volunteering for the rewrite committee. But
you're fine to leave
if you
the
couldn't
off.
get it right, what were you doing here?
Yeah.
Maybe you weren't mentally fresh.
Well, I guess I would push back on that only to say that there are 50 members, right? So that means like, that's a lot of people. So a 2% fail, like 2% of messing up one vote means that someone messed up, right? And 2% is pretty small. And the fact that these votes are public, right, means that I don't understand what the possible problem would be with curing ballots. It is not a private vote. Like everyone can look and see how you voted on any election. So I think that just because someone had a bad day, which is pretty likely among 50 people at 8 o'clock on a weeknight, and they screwed something up, they should have the right to fix that. So I think like no one has articulated to me like what the potential downside is, other than perhaps that like it adds some time. But as we all know from these meetings, like sometimes they take longer than they should. So for me, I think because it's a public vote, the right to cure it, I think is, important. And I think also because it's a public vote, it's kind of unfair to the person who screwed up the ballot that everyone knows they screwed up the ballot. So that would be the other thing. Like the nice thing about curing is that, we protect that.
And
I agree. Jurisdictions all over this country have been trying to create the perfect ballot. I know we think we're gonna create the perfect ballot, nobody's gonna screw it up, but believe me, somebody's gonna screw it up.
We found
And
that.
it might be me. I think what we want is for the vote to reflect the will of the board. And as Adam said, I can't think of, I'd like to hear a reason why we shouldn't allow people to cure any technical mistake. It just seems, we want it to reflect the will of the board.
Well, as someone who was asked to cure the ballot, and I am that very person who you asked, what were you doing here? But I'm confident enough to say that I think I'm smart enough to fill out a ballot. I think, first of all, the ballot was messy. I also want to ask why we are voting on paper, which is a separate part of our conversation. I do think we could vote electronically. We can turn the screen off. Privacy can be afforded. But if we want to vote on paper, I can assure you we are never going to create a perfect ballot. It's just not going to happen. There will always be a mistake. So if there's a possibility of a mistake, I, for one, am against the curing of the ballot. And here's why, Ken, my dear friend. It creates the appearance of an impropriety. People want to know what's going on in that room back there.
Exactly.
And the very suggestion that was brought up in this steering committee meeting a month ago, that the people back there were fixing the tie vote, is the very reason I would suggest we should not cure the ballot.
That was discussed last month.
That was suggested.
As somebody who was in that back room, I'm
Yes,
pretty
yes,
offended by
exactly.
that.
That's exactly, and I was in the back room with you and we were not fixing the vote. So the suggestion of impropriety is the reason we should not cure ballots. The election committee did a superb, and it has not been said enough, by the way, since we've been talking about this now for 2 months. They did a superb and outstanding job in a meeting that was confused and complicated by technology problems, by kibitzing in the aisles, by all kinds of conversations that were happening in the rows when we should have been focused, and things that were beyond your control, and other people who are not here. And so we should not undermine their good work by then questioning the outcome and curing the ballots. If a ballot like mine, forgive me, give me 1 more minute since I was called into question. If a ballot like mine is in error, just throw it out. And if it results in the candidate that I voted for not winning, well, then that's the fault of those who voted. Also, I was not watching a ball game. My dear friend Adam.
apologize for that insinuation.
Please
I
clarify that, because we were
apologize.
sitting right near each other. I never do anything other than pay attention to what's going on. I'm finished.
Lots of comments. I don't know who had their hand up. Does it? Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I just can ask a question,
During
Adam
this
had
part.
brought up
Yeah.
that, and I know this is part of others, that the vote is not private in the end.
Yeah, you can go.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
which I understand, which I think brings to your point, like,
And go to
why
the
are we
meeting.
not doing this electronically? What is the like, why are we not using the system since the?
I can answer that too.
I think you don't want electioneering in between rounds.
At least my understanding of it is, and that was sort of what we discussed prior to the election, is that in real time, you can see who's voting. Right, and that can influence your vote. It's really just the voting procedure during the vote is private, and then the results are public. So
But we don't
that was,
use-
I think that's.
we don't
We
display it.
Turned off.
don't have to, right, we don't have to display
I
it, so that,
disagree.
so effectively it would be private,
I
but
disagree. It's not a public, vote. It's a private vote.
Private vote.
It's a
It's a private vote.
The results
Those
are-
votes are available in the office.
They're available, and traditionally, there were very few times that anyone went it's happened, went to the
I
office
was
and
contacted
checked it
about my
out.
vote.
What's that?
I said I was contacted about my vote,
I know.
and I'm okay with
But
that.
that's a
Like,
person's choice to do that, but it traditionally has not been what people do unless they felt there was something unusual, but so that's the first piece. So it's not a public, it's not like everything else we do, okay, where everyone can see what we vote. And it's questionable, okay? It's not a secret ballot, but it's somewhat of a secret ballot initially. In terms of the ballots, there are two things that need to be done. The ballot should have on it clearly what needs to be done. And if any of this is not done, then this could be invalidated because there are people who come on new. They haven't had the discussion, or they're not here tonight and they really pay attention. And we want everyone to know, and those rules should be read out clearly. And, as right before people vote, and please, we hope that you will follow these instructions so that your ballot will be valid. I agree, when people are in a room doing something, okay, one year we had 2.5 hours of it, okay, with the borough president, the deputy borough president being brought in to check it. People say, what's going on here?
Right.
Okay, we're supposed to be, a civilized, democratic group, okay? And what's going on? So I think we should have in writing on the ballot what needs to be done and what will cause an invalidation of the ballot.
Regardless of, what you're saying is important input to the design of the
Right,
ballot.
absolutely.
the meeting.
It doesn't address
I agree.
the fundamental question on the table, which is, do we allow hearing? Do we not allow hearing?
My
So-
answer is no.
Okay, so.
Should we vote on this separately?
We can, I think the rest of this, everyone felt was just clear, not in any way controversial, right? Okay, those who would support. Which one should we start with? Who would support carrying a ballot? How do we frame this?
Why not?
Allow for
Make a
certain
suggestion.
Yeah.
We could call the question on what you have written now,
And see if it
and then
passes.
see if it passes, and then we could secondarily say, should we have another bylaw revision just on carrying ballots?
Okay,
But we
So-
did not address the the voting with using
Correct.
technology versus paper.
I don't think that has to be in the.
It can be in the
bylaws, though.
discussion about the
It's in the
design of the
bylaw.
ballot.
right now, the bylaw says that we do a paper ballot for an election.
That's okay.
It's.
I rewrote it too.
I think we.
States are
You know,
debating
there's a
this
problem.
in the
If
whole
we're
country.
going there, we have board members who are not.
Yeah.
Who are not able to vote. I mean,
Correct. And have to essentially get technical assistance.
and I help several of them vote.
Mhm.
So I would not want to help someone vote for an officer because I want them to be private. And I think paper is fine. I don't have a problem with paper. I have a problem with the way ballots.
Technically, you can have someone that, when you kind of paper, there are people.
Okay, can we leave the, I think for now, since we really would need to redesign a process for voting electronically on and beyond what we have currently, in order to retain the confidentiality. So I think that may be more than we can chew right now. So let's vote on this.
Call to question.
We'll call the question on as written, and then we'll call the question again on whether or not to add back something around ballot curing. Okay?
Second.
I'm sorry, Beverly. Can you just clarify exactly what we are voting on right now? Just if you could state it again.
Sure. We're voting on the modifications that were circulated, which do not include the item on curing ballots. So it's everything else, the technical fixes that were put forth. Around our.
Got it.
So all in favor of this component of change?
Without the curing.
Without curing ballots. And then we'll vote on curing ballots. Committee members only right now.
I have 13.
Yeah.
No.
I can't see.
Natasha, did you vote?
She has her hand up.
She does, thank you.
14. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, now, non-committee. In favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, then put to the test, do we wish to have a provision added that addresses the need to cure ballots? We'll have to figure out how to write it, but, in a way that is not too flexible. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Really just a question as background to this, is the assumption, which I don't think this would be in the bylaws, that there will be somebody rewriting the ballot? Is that a predicate for this vote?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, but that, I don't think that has to be in the bylaws, we're just doing it.
It should be, that's your,
Yeah. I can read to you what was originally there that I struck out after the conversation, all right?
Yes.
What I had written was a new section 4B3A4 is added stating at the discretion of the election committee during the counting of votes, voters whose ballots have minor technical issues may be invited to cure their ballots to make their intention clear.
May I add one thing to that, which would just be like in the presence of all who wish to watch, so that the curing process is public in some way.
No.
Election committee. 50 people in a little room.
If people in the back room.
I don't see how that really works, but.
I feel like.
I like what you're getting at, though.
Right, like there's
There's
supposed to be,
there's a committee
it's
in that room.
But he's trying to
Okay,
get
so
around.
that is the thing that we are voting on now, whether or not to add.
so call the question up.
Can we call the
Second.
question on this?
I
First,
just say that if we accepted Jamie's idea, which I'm in favor of, to vote electronically with a screen off, so it becomes a private
I
vote.
don't know if we can vote.
That could be
electronically.
taken by an election committee that are the only people who view it,
Right.
even though it's available in the office for anybody to view afterwards. Then we solve this whole
That's
problem.
right.
We don't have an issue with anybody voting because they can.
You're gonna have a problem with electronics. You're
No,
gonna have
no.
a problem with electronics.
No, we should be.
That's why we have the new vice chair of technology.
Vice chairs of technology.
They shouldn't have, well, that's.
We don't need that just to fix this problem.
I think we can vote on this, and then if we can do the
Right.
electronic properly.
Yeah.
Then I'm sure people.
we'll bring
will
it
be-
back.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So call the question.
Call a question on adding that language back in.
Second.
Second.
I second it.
All right, all in favor of adding in a ballot curing
Committee members.
committee members?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm only counting, Online is a no.
Her hand's not up.
Oh, sorry.
Your call, yes.
1, 2, 3, fair ball, foul ball, 6. I'm only counting 6.
All opposed?
Natasha is on.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
The motion fails and we do not,
Abstentions.
abstentions.
And none.
They can't be.
Yeah, they're only 14.
Well, I'm just,
Let's
I'm trying to do the procedure.
Let's have a roll call.
I'm just trying to go by the rules.
Let's vote
Non-committee members, not that it will matter because of non-committee members in favor,
Well, it matters that they voice their opinion.
yes.
Mhm.
1,
Non-committee members opposed.
1, 2, 3. No abstentions.
Motion goes.
Motion fails. Okay,
There will be no
so
cure.
No cure.
we're now coming to the easy one, right? We agree.
No, I did not.
The item relating to the establishment of an additional vice chair. Incorporating the changes that Shelley addressed last meeting in terms of, redefining the role more generally and broadly, have been inserted. Other than that, there was just a lot of, I felt, disparate views on this. Personally support this because I believe that this level of expertise is critical to have on our executive committee. And I think we were very lucky to have had somebody last year who had that level of expertise, who was in a position that was never defined by a particular role that required these things and was basically volunteering out of title. I think we need to have something that suggests this is important to us and that will attract members who have technical expertise in the future to run for office. So those are my views. I know many feel differently, so let's go at it here. Go ahead.
I wasn't at the last meeting. I apologize for that. Mark that down. But I don't understand, or I'd like to understand why we feel it's necessary to, this almost feels like, and I'm not, yeah, I'm just gonna say, it. I feel like it's sour grapes for people who didn't get the person they wanted to be elected to that position. So this is creating a position because they're upset that their person didn't win. And you know what? There's an election, there's a winner, and there's a loser. And if we want to do this for next year, then we should change it for next year. But I do not believe changing it retroactively is okay. With that being said, why not make the treasurer a vice chair? I mean, what difference does it make? We do need this position, but it doesn't have to be a vice chair, in my opinion, retroactive.
I am.
That's my opinion.
I am not wedded to this title. Part of the problem I had was that every alternative title I could think of for this sounded much too corporate. Do we want to check technology officer?
Well, we may not always even have a person who would be necessarily qualified for this position either. And, you know, we were fortunate that we did have it this time, but there may be a time, although technology, obviously more people are doing it and involved and advanced, there may be a time when we don't have a person who fills this role, then what happens?
I think this is a skill set we can recruit for. It's also a skill set that many of our members who join who are, say, under 35.
Sure.
Are very comfortable in this world.
And over 70.
And we
And
have,
over
a-
70.
and we have a, and I would say, you know, I'm just saying that if we want to do it moving forward, I feel like great, but I just feel like it's sour grapes for the people who didn't get their person elected.
Our district managers.
There's no way staff can do these technical things?
Actually,
I think
I had a hand up, so may I just grab the floor for a minute?
Sure.
Okay, yes, technically staff can, but we're too busy with other things during the meetings. That's one of the issues. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, I look at it from a budgetary and operational perspective. If we could have someone that can kind of have a more formalized role here, we could maybe save about $5,500 to $6,000 in our budget, which is more than 50% of our budget. You guys are probably all familiar with John. He has dreads. He's our tech consultant. That's $500 a full board meeting. And right now I'm looking at about $9,000 of expenses and we only have about $4,000. And so if we could have a role that can then eliminate John, as much as a great guy as he is, that's how I'm looking at it from our budgetary perspective. And again, totally defer as to who it's housed in or how it's formulated, when it starts, but that's kind of the reality that I'm looking at it from.
I think also it's a role that has a policy component inherent in it, which makes me feel it is not a role that should belong to staff. It's a role that should be a board member, because you're making decisions that impact, you know, how we do business, how we conceive of our role with the community, how we communicate. These are policy matters, and I think it's a board member that needs to drive that agenda. And I think it's a different agenda from the positions we have defined. Elizabeth.
Okay, so I see this as two separate things. One, I feel like we can have a vice chair position, like a second vice chair with responsibilities that could include technology, could include public safety next year, could include something else that's the issue du jour, right? Okay, or we could create the role as a very technical CTO type, whatever the title is that we're gonna call it, that would not be considered a vice chair role. What the second thing I wanted to address was this whole issue about hours and budgets and time saved and money saved, which I think we should not be relying on an unpaid volunteer to do. With all due respect to the three very hardworking, very tech savvy people, there are 3 full-time staff in the board office. You guys are all working around the clock. I know that. You're all great. But I don't think we should be putting this position and assigning work to that person that's a volunteer on our board to do work that paid staff in the board office that designates as stuff that they can't do, therefore this person should be doing. So my personal choice would be, if we want a second vice chair, we should have a second vice chair that have those responsibilities be vague, and whoever gets selected for that can maybe focus on the technical items, technology items, or we can create a technical position, but one that is not there just to be sort of a fourth staff person in the board office.
My experience really though is that having a defined role in our bylaws has been critical in attracting folks to the treasurer's role who have the vast experience necessary to do that work, right? I think if you define it and put it there, people who have that particular skill set are going to find an interest in running. Build it and they will come, is my view. And I've seen that happen. And I think that's, if this is something we need not to just rely on chance that somebody's going to show up who has this skill set and apply. I mean, yeah.
I was just gonna say, there's no money in the budget right now for a full-time staffer with that background. So if we want to hire somebody full-time, there's a process we have to go through that doesn't solve.
But I'm
the
saying that I
problem
don't think we
today.
need, like, maybe I'm just being anachronistic here from like my years in the past, but we had 2 staff people and we had a lot of technology work that needed done. And between all of us, we figured out a way to get it done. I think that without having to assign one person to do it, okay, one person on the board. And what I fear is that in another year or in another 2 years, there's going to be something that is very significant. And to Beverly's point of wanting to attract people, build it, they will come. What if public safety becomes the big issue? And we need to have somebody who has a strong public safety background, right? Technology overrides everything we do, right? So whoever, I think it would be great if the vice chair position, that was their mandate. They took a significant time to do that this year. That was the big priority of the board that's not getting done. But maybe next year, the priority shifts a little bit and there needs to be you know, as technology evolves, we're all getting up to speed on technology. Maybe the board office is getting their groove and doing a little bit more. Like, I think, again, I go back to what I said at the beginning, that I think a second vice chair, I think those responsibilities become clear for those of us who have been vice chairs before. I took technology on front and center when I was a vice chair. Believe it or not, these meetings didn't used to be live streamed. Nobody wanted them live streamed. We didn't have social media on this board, okay? Small things, I realize, not as urgent and as big. It didn't require a whole lot of work to do that, but people did it. And so I took that responsibility on in my capacity as being a vice chair. And I think a new vice chair could very well do that. That's all.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Doug and then work around that.
So notwithstanding whatever we vote on, I am curious to know, there are 50 boards in the city of New York, 12 in Manhattan. Every one of them, I believe, is going through these kinds of challenges with technology. So I'd like to know, we had a great guest speaker today. I'm curious what the other boards are doing.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think
59 community boards, isn't it?
I think it's 59. Oh, then I
59 across the city.
59 citywide. So
Doug, I have an answer to the first half of your question if you want it.
okay.
When
Yes.
you're ready.
Okay, well, my other part of the question, which is adjunct to that, is, we always come back to budget and money. It's a shame, and maybe I shouldn't put it that way, but it's been an opportunity. The borough president should be training board members on running meetings and the technical aspect of it. And the money should be coming from the borough president so that many people on our board who wish to and are able to become technically savvy. By the way, Alex Bell gave me a nice little training on the voting app and the timer app, which, by the way, is great.
Which we didn't use.
And we did not use because a decision was made that night, but it is not difficult. That just speaking in a vacuum. So anyway, I'd love to hear your answer.
The two comments. One, first, I know Avi's not here today, but it was such a breath of fresh air to have Avi come up to me after the meeting the other day when we didn't use the phone voting system and say, Max, how can I learn? Is that something I can do? I would have loved it had at least half the other people in this room done that. So anyway, we're getting Avi up to speed, and that's great. And I think it is something, Alex Bell obviously has some very serious tech skills, but the extent of those aren't utilized in his platform. It's really something that most people can learn. So that's point one. The other point, you'd asked how many boards kind of struggle with these things, but I don't know the other boroughs, but I know Manhattan, and every board in Manhattan hires an external consultant like John, or before him, Mark Moss. And that's great. And if that's how they want to share, how they want to use their very small city budgets to pay that $500 or more per meeting, that's fine, but maybe we can do better by bringing that in-house somehow.
Shelley, is there another hand? Go ahead.
So you're ahead of me.
Oh, Beverly, also you have a hand on line too, but I think Shelley was first.
Oh, okay, hold on. Let's do Murat and then,
Whomever, I'm in.
okay, Murat, and then we'll go to Alice, okay?
My just whole thought process about this is that we have two distinct issues, in my opinion. One is the immediate need for being able to use this technology to continue our operations and keep things flowing. And two is a longer term need to adapt to the needs of the board, which might be a public safety issue later on. And so thinking back to the discussion about what should the bylaws reflect, I think it should be big enough to be adaptable to the evolving needs of the board over time. But I think in the meantime, we need to address our current need first. So I just wanted to put that out there for the framing in my head to see whether or not the board is in alignment on that.
So how would you alter what is on the proposed item in order to create that flexibility that you're saying?
So how I would frame the bylaws revision would be to allow for the steering committee to create ad hoc officer positions to meet the needs of the board or something to that effect. So that we don't have to necessarily specify what the role is gonna be in the bylaws, and instead we can specify it outside of the bylaws with permission from the bylaws. And I would give that permission to the steering committee because those are the leaders of the board and have a bit more people have a say than just.
They're the executive committee alone. Interesting. Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Hello from NYPD. Sorry I couldn't be there. Just wanted to provide a few data points about about the work this past year. So like, yeah, the voting app is not something that's publicly available. I wrote that from scratch and host that on my own system. And the other boards have reached out to using it. So actually I'm helping give the access to some other people, but it's not like a publicly available thing. Similarly, the website, I think Max was talking to a consultant to spend, I think 5 or 10K to create a website, but that wasn't in the budget. And so I wrote that myself. We created the website myself. I paid for the hosting, continue to pay for the hosting, and then help train Jesse on how to use it. And, you know, a few times, probably once a week, I go to the board office to fix an OWL issue or something to do with the video cameras or the website or something. So it's definitely, I think it's, you know, the technology is changing so fast. I think it'd be quite difficult to, although Jesse and Max and Alex are amazing, to have them, you know, be able to create some of these things we've been able to create for them. But yeah, that's just the data points I wanted to give.
And if I could just piggyback on that very briefly and say, you know, my background is in urban planning. That's my graduate degree. Alex is getting an MPA. All of us studied government and have worked in government. I know what my limitations are, and I would be absolutely underwater if I didn't have Alex or someone like Alex. And to Beverly's point earlier, many of these functions are things that are learned in general curriculum. And so anyone that's roughly maybe under 35, more or less, would have many of the skills that are required for this.
Or over 70.
Or perhaps over 70, or a willingness to learn like Avi approached us the other day.
He's under 35. Shelley, your hand was up as well, and then we'll continue around.
I felt from the beginning, and even at the election, that when we had a tie, we should have 2 vice chairs, but I had 3 vice chairs as a chair of the board. And I had roles for all of them based on certain things that the board needed and what their expertise were. And when Elizabeth was a vice chair, eventually chair, she brought us into social media. She had the knowledge, the understanding, and the ability. And although some of us were a little uncomfortable, she did it. And it wasn't her role. Okay, she had other roles in her job as vice chair. I think we need 2 vice chairs, okay? A first vice chair and a second vice chair, okay? And if we need this expertise in technology, for instance, we'll see who's on the board. And we could ask, and if we don't have anyone, we can say to the borough president, we need you to appoint people with these skills above. That's our greatest need right now. But I have a feeling we have people on the board, and it may be that one of the people who are already elected or are going to be elected will have that. Now, if it becomes so pressing that we have to have like a vice president, a vice chair, then that year, the election should be about who can fill this role, this need that we can't do. And if that it's around technology. And if it's a certain individual and they're running, then they should be voted in by the board because that person has the ability to meet a major need, or if it's something else, okay? So I think we should have a second vice chair. I think most people would agree with that. And we understand what the needs are. I think it's been very clear, and that people will understand that when they have nominations and vote.
So, is what you are suggesting that we vote on altering what is here to simply make it a second vice chair position as existed prior?
Yes.
that would be fairly easy to change the language.
Yeah, that would be it. I think
So
that
then
would
there's
be
the further-
acceptable.
There's the further question of when this position, if approved in December by the board, when would it be filled?
Okay, and right now it says. Right now.
Right now, our bylaws say the next month.
Next month. I think that's a separate issue. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I think we could do it. We could do it.
Actually, it says the next meeting, so it's unclear whether
If
we
we
could take nominations in December,
conceivable,
right?
okay? If it's approved,
All right, so I'd like to hear the rest of around the room before we perhaps vote. Again, I am feeling needy about the lack of this skill set. And that is what underpinned my proposal in the first place.
I'll
And
tell you what I'm afraid of. But I'm afraid of we might vote down the position. And then what do we have?
I just-
We do need a CTO.
Right? We have one vice chair,
CTO.
great, but we don't have,
Yeah.
right?
all
So
right, so
Be an officer.
Seema and then Michael and Larry.
I agree wholly with
Speak up.
what Shelley just said. I think there's a concern, as Murat said, about the flexibility for the future. So I think it should be left up to the discretion of the chair, what role each vice chair, if we have two vice chairs, what role each one fills and what needs to become pressing, and we can be a little bit more nimble in that case.
That would suggest defining the roles for a second vice chair. As something that the chair would in fact flesh out.
Yes. Which is like, at least my impression of the way the vice chairs have worked in the past is,
Right.
it has been up to them about what, issues they take on. The two other things are,
But what you want to do is then define it before the election so that it tracks the
yes,
folks that you need to do the work.
yes, which actually brings me to my two other points. One is about leadership. I think about the vice chairs as sort of the future leaders of the board, if not the actual leaders of the board. And I worry that with such a specific job description, it will deter a lot of people from throwing their hat into the ring. Because Alex has done an incredible amount of work, but I'm not sure that other board members either have the will or the ability to do that, and therefore wouldn't be under
What
consideration.
I was concerned about, was creating a second vice chair position that was undefined because the previous second vice chair, if you look at the bylaws that were in effect, back in 2022, there was no definition of what that person did. None.
that's because the
The chair,
bylaw committee decided not to. I had sent in a whole list of possible roles for them to choose from, and they said, very interesting, but they weren't interested.
Michael?
I'll have to just respectfully disagree with some of the more recent opinions and go back to Beverly's report, which I am in support of that. I think it should be a very specifically defined role. While I appreciate sometimes the benefit of vagueness and, how that can lead to some nimbleness, I also think that the reality is that what Alex has built is very usable for a lot of people currently if they get the training for it. This last month was just extraordinary circumstance where folks who were able to do it were both unable to be at that meeting. But the reality is a lot of us can do it. I think the other side of that reality is the actual difficult hard work that Alex did was all behind the scenes. And as technology is not going anywhere, platforms update, codes need to be rewritten, languages change all the time. And if we're anticipating I think we should actively anticipate the need for those types of changes and someone to have the ability and expertise to speak to those types of responsibilities. I think that I understand the reason behind keeping it big, but I think that, I don't know if I would have been attracted to a role if it was like, hey, you're gonna have some set of responsibilities and it might be this, and then a month later, I'm being told something totally different.
So it seems to me, first of all, that the title is off-putting, Vice Chair for Operations and Technology. What you were suggesting, or what many have suggested around the table, is just second vice chair.
That's true.
And then the question is, how is the role defined? I think you could continue to have there are two items left in the definition of the role based on what was revised last month, right? One is assist the chairperson in overseeing operational and technical aspects of the community board. And then in the event that this one is vacant and that one's hit by a truck, this is the person who will step in, right? And that's it. So it seems to me that you could basically retain that definition.
Keep the responsibilities, change the title.
Yes.
Well, yes, but no. I think that the responsibilities that we've just discussed, that you very aptly point out everyone says agrees are needed on the board, are not necessarily the second and third parts of this that you're describing about, the leadership of like showing up and presenting externally, going and being in succession for the leadership of the board. That is very different from the skills we just have been talking about. And that's where I'm having.
Well, the way our bylaws
So
define
to me,
things
it's either you make it a
is that-
second position.
Well, the bylaws define all the elected officers as having a role in the succession of folks who become ill or not available or can't attend or whatever. So this would just fall in that.
But why is that role more elevated than, let's say, the treasurer or a committee chair or another member of the executive committee? Why is that the way that it is?
Where would you put it? I mean, you have to
I
put it
think
somewhere.
you put it, that's why I go back to like, why aren't we creating a separate executive level position similar to a treasurer or a co-secretary
But
that is
those-
focused on technology and operations?
But they'll be in some order, because of the way our bylaws work. So if you don't want it immediately after the vice chair, where do you want it?
I don't know. I don't know where it would go. But I think that if what we're talking about here is written in the bylaws as you're describing them now, that it's second in command, I'm not sure.
It's third in command.
Third in command, okay.
It could be fourth in command. Well, I mean, that's just changing the
In
language.
succession, not command.
In
right?
succession.
Just-
Yes.
Everybody stay alive and stay healthy.
Sorry.
Okay, a few things. One is that, unless my memory's going bonkers, and I don't think it has on this, for many, many years, we had 3 vice chairs. And it was unclear what any of them ever, Elizabeth certainly correctly has described how she stepped in and did something very useful at a time. It was unclear why we had 3, what they were doing. For the most part, they didn't have defined responsibility, didn't do much at all. We then got to 2, and then eventually we got to 1 for basically the reasons I said. Number 2, I don't think it makes sense to have this so vague that if the need of the board was more urgently public safety than technology in a year or two, that this person would be that. And I also think that Murat's idea that the steering committee could create additional officers, that just doesn't work administratively. With regard to something public safety or any other issue that becomes a great priority in the future, we do task forces. We've had a public safety group, and there are many ways to address a specific board need that may be temporary, we hope, or maybe more permanent. I've gradually come around, I think, to agreeing with the original proposal that Beverly has. I'm not troubled by what you call it. I thought the name was fine, as long as the responsibilities are defined as you have. And I guess I would support voting for what Beverly originally presented or as amended from time to time as we came into tonight, largely out of respect for Beverly's real world experiences in trying to run this operation. She more than any of us really knows what the problems are, how it works. She's worked with our staff. She knows what they can do, what they can't do. She worked with Alex. I think it's quite correct, as Shelley said, I think it was Shelley, that if we have this defined set of responsibilities for, and whatever the title is, for the second vice chair, Well, then get candidates who propose themselves to be elected to that position, who have the qualifications, the interest, and the willingness to spend time to do it. So all of that having been said, I'm with Beverly.
Thank you, Claire.
I'd just like to go back to my
Wait,
original.
Josh, can I
Yeah,
jump
of
in
course.
before? I'm not on the steering though.
That's okay.
Okay.
I actually want to pick up though on where you started and also I think where Shelley led us with a question. So I want to understand how this rolls out if it were to pass. Are there nominations? How does
I
it
think
work?
the way-
Schedule? I read, I want you to know, I did my homework. I don't want to be one of these
There
people
is a
who's accused of
provision
not
in-
reading the
There is a
material.
provision in the bylaws.
Right.
That exists currently.
Not it, right, in the regular
Um,
bylaws.
Not a revision.
Mhm.
That says when a vacancy occurs in a position, and once we vote on it, it's a vacant position.
So that it becomes a vacant position.
Correct.
Okay.
Then at the next or the next available full board meeting, the election can occur.
So first would be the full board voting on what
Yeah.
steering has voted on.
And I would frankly go to Richard in his capacity as our legal eagle and ask exactly what can be done at the December meeting.
Mhm.
It seems to me that it would make sense to me to at least do nominations in December. And if we had to do an election in January, do it then.
So your desire would be if steering, I'm sorry, I just want to
I
understand.
would
If
love to-
steering were to pass this,
Right.
you would want then to have full board to vote on it, and then if it passed again, have nominations at that same meeting.
I think that would, if that
And-
is
and let me-
possible,
may I
it would
ask
seem
one-
to me to be fine.
And all candidates, anyone could,
Anyone,
including Alex,
yes,
could apply.
correct.
That's all I needed to know.
I'd like to just go back to my
Please.
original.
Thank you, Josh, for letting
Thank
me.
you, I appreciate that. I just want to go back to my original question that, or a question that's based on something that Clary said, actually, that if there was such a need for this, why was it not brought for the election? That's my first question. And my second question is very specifically, if Alex had won the election, would there even be a discussion to have a second vice chair? And I think the answer to that, everybody in this room would admit, is no.
Right, what do you conclude from that?
I conclude that everybody is, the people that didn't get their candidate to win want to create this position because they're not happy with the election. And look, we've seen this in this
Well,
country.
that's a
but-
different issue.
No,
When
but-
we need the position.
But we can call it whatever we want and we can do it moving forward. I just feel like, look, we saw this for the past 4 years. Relitigating the election because we're not happy with the results. Is this the kind of society that we want to live in? That we're going to relitigate an election because we don't like the results? Look, I don't like the results of the last election, but I have to accept that. That's the way that people voted, and that's just the way it goes. It's my opinion.
I think.
Probably create the position. It doesn't have to be vice chair.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, make the treasurer vice chair. Make how about we all become vice chairs? Like, what difference does it make?
So
It's just,
technology.
let's get rid of the vice.
Yeah, is it just technology?
Yeah, that's, I mean, this is what I said at the beginning, just create it.
Born out of the, some people.
Josh and Elizabeth
I think
are saying a lot of the
from
same
my
thing.
point of view,
You're both on the same wavelength. Yeah.
We're all in this, like,
what, from my point of view, I think you may be right that if Alex had in fact prevailed, we would not be having this conversation. On the other hand, the fact that he did not really put into deep perspective for me the importance of this function.
Well, that's his, and it's our fault as a board to not recognize that.
Well, then why not, if we made a mistake as a board by not having a recognition of this need, correct that now?
why do we need?
Barbara?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Josh,
Yep.
were you at the meeting? Were you there?
Which one?
The election. Okay. So there were 3 rounds. And there were 3 ties. And the election started at some point and went on for over 2 hours. During that time,
The 3 times.
2 people left. And that changed the vote. And an election shouldn't go on for 2 hours. I don't know why it took 2 hours, but it, basically this election was a tie. Two people were allowed to go.
I don't think we
I
should
think
continue to say that
Yeah,
the
and I
election
think
was a
Natasha,
tie.
if anyone should speak about the elections, it's
yeah.
Natasha.
What? Excuse me, but Natasha came out 3 times and said it was a tie.
No, she said the first time that no one had a majority.
Right.
Because there were 3 people running. The second time was a tie.
Okay.
And the third time there was
An issue with
a
ballots.
decision.
And if people left, they left, and the election is what it is. They should
Right.
stay.
Exactly.
We're not gonna relitigate what happened during the election. The question for me is, are we gonna proceed with the creation of a position that we need?
It's not a matter of sour grapes because somebody didn't get the vote.
Well, that's just my
some of
opinion.
us wanted, you know, I mean, that's silly. And
My
the question is, if, you know, whether we create a position and have somebody who's operations and technology or public safety or whatever and chairs decision, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, can we have some last? So let's finish the conversation because I think we have some settled views in the room. And we should just make sure we understand what they are.
I agree. I just wanted to clarify that based on our bylaws, we would vote on it in December. Then it says the next meeting would be
That's right.
nominations. So January would
No,
be.
it says the election would be the next meeting.
No, the bylaws say if an officer position becomes vacant, nominations to fill the remaining time of the term shall be taken by the last constituted election committee at the next regularly scheduled full board. So just to clarify, it would
Well,
be,
it's vacant the moment.
I think it's still. My point is,
That's
I
what-
agree with you. I would be happy to vote on this. I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I want to go to Richard and have him parse the language as to when we could vote. Michael.
I think just one thing that maybe there's a greater chance of consensus or this passing. It seems that everyone seems to acknowledge, or most people seem to acknowledge the need for someone to fill this role, whether it's coming from the staff of the office or a variety of perspectives across this committee. So I wonder if there's a solution where we're taking the vice chair out of it, we're naming it something else. We're clearly delineating where they fall in the pecking order, chair, vice chair, treasurer, technology officer, co-secretaries. And then, like, I understand the hang up on like the name of it, and why it feels uncomfortable and feels jargony and all that, but it's just gonna, like, treasurer is also sort of a jargony term, in my opinion, like, it's like, so is co-secretary, like they're all, like, I don't know, I think it just, we'd have a better chance of getting a plurality here if maybe we just had a little bit of accommodation toward one another, and then maybe we can bring something.
I again, I'm not wedded to the title.
Well, and when you
I
get to
think
full
so.
board.
Yeah, well, that's my point too, it's like, I think it's.
And my point was that I believe if we have a second vice chair position and we don't, we're more likely to get a consensus on having 2 vice chairs. Okay, of having that second position and agreed upon. I have a feeling if we force a title, then we may have nothing at the end.
I understand that. I think my fear is that if we have a vice chair that's not defined, then a year from now, we're saying, we still need someone to fill the technology
Fine.
role, and then it's, let's get a 3rd vice chair and a 4th, and a, you know, like that.
So, no, but I mean, what we can do is, again, I have no real allegiance to this particular title. It was a struggle. I admit that. You want to call it second vice chair, but leave the role definition that's under number 1. That would do it to me.
I would personally be more in favor of define the title, define the responsibilities, and take the vice chair out of it. And then it's just technology officer, and that's another member of the executive committee.
But then, I mean, it's sort of random who gets in what sequence.
Yeah, but it's sort of random now.
Decide what it is.
Steve has had his hand up before, and he's the only member of the public in the room, so.
I
I'd like to
will
give him a
stand
chance.
clear of the succession and authority that you are all struggling with, advice of my own self. But as a communications person, when organizations come to me and they say, we want to do hybrid meetings on location, I say, that's terrific. You only need 2 things, either significant budget or significant staffing, and it's a great idea. But if not, you better not do that, because we know time and time again, my friends, every nonprofit organization has communications committees, has people who recognize the intrinsic importance of everything about messaging. everything about sharing information, about engaging people in the work you do, about recognizing this is not an ancillary issue. Let's have somebody in the back take care of that. The people in communications have moved to the front of the office. Okay, the recognitions that there are tools and there are issues that need to be discussed. You don't need a person who's going to be the answer. You need to have a group of people who struggle with policy issues related to communications, who understand that the technology of today opens up opportunities that weren't around, that weren't in the dialogue, that let people weigh in and participate in ways. This is an opportunity for great citizen engagement. It's not just a problem to find some person and give them a title. Because if you don't have that perfect person, then what do you have? I think you have to have a new commitment to communications, and it's not about just the title. So I urge you to prioritize this. This is an issue of the day, okay? It's not just something we ought to think about or create a title for. It's a real challenge that you face and that many organizations face, but you need to invest in it.
All right.
Yeah, I have to go shortly. I'd love to vote. So can I call the question on Beverly's proposal?
Right, and does anyone want to change the title? I could go with second vice chair, I could go with vice chair for communications, I could go with another, whatever. But I think that we've, again, had a very full conversation here today.
I would like to suggest second vice chair.
And just sort of do a global search replace of the title that I put in, and everything else stays the same.
So the definition of the duties is
Yes.
still there.
Second vice chair.
We'll throw something crazy out. If you created two positions, you had a second vice chair and a chief technology officer.
No.
Then you have an odd, no, I'm just saying, then you have an odd number of.
Yeah, but it
executive
gets
members.
very large. Can you imagine scheduling executive team meetings with 17?
No problem with that. We don't want them to-
Well, it'd be interesting to see.
No.
We have never in
Interesting
2
to see
years
the
had a
man for
tie
that
vote
position.
ever.
Yeah.
Then you would have
Okay.
majority.
We're not going there. All right, second vice chair, everything else the same. Question's been called. All in favor?
One,
Do you have Natasha as well?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
All opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Abstain.
You're abstaining?
Yeah.
I am too.
Oh, sorry.
So it fails.
It fails.
Wait, 652, yeah.
6-5.
Because abstentions are
The
no.
other vote.
Non-committee members, all in favor?
3, 4.
Four.
Oh, sorry.
Four.
Oh, Alex's.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, fine.
Five.
And post.
Oh,
It's only
non-committee
five.
members opposed. Okay,
Should we
Is
do
this
it
good?
again with the, like, CTO or some non-vice chair title?
I personally would be in favor of it with a
Yeah.
change title. But
well, that may make all the difference. So what's the
Making a motion.
change title that you would,
I would just take the vice chair out of the person, like technology officers. I would just,
DTO.
if it is, as long as it's not a vice chair,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
technology officer?
yeah.
okay, technology officer.
Can you not create a committee? That's not permitted.
I don't think this is a committee job.
It's not a committee job.
No.
You can.
Technology officer.
And where is this in the?
Where should it be
Succession?
in the succession?
Class.
It's all the time.
Alphabetically, it comes before treasurer.
I feel like it's certainly above coast. Whether, how it falls between treasurer and.
I would leave it as just below vice chair myself.
I mean,
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
All right, can we have a vote? Same thing, except the title has now been changed to technology officer.
Is it
question?
chief technology?
No,
please.
no chief.
No chief.
Technology officer.
Yeah.
The captain.
Call the question. Second.
Or maybe How about technology and communications officer?
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Call to question.
second.
All in favor of technology and communications officer?
And everything else stays the same.
Everything else.
What you do that, no?
Busting through that red tape. 12, 13, I count.
Okay, all opposed? Any members? There's-
I got
Excellent.
Any opposed?
Somebody?
Yeah, we
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
Roberta.
Roberta,
All opposed? Any abstentions?
I know exactly.
Okay. Non-committee members?
I'm glad I'm not the only one that's so.
Oh, yeah.
1, 2, 3.
The way it was written, it's like if you're running something for me. Transit admin, fire
It's
manager,
a
served on
technology
MTA
and
board.
communications officer.
You know,
His title is
chair,
vice chair. It's technology officer.
It's still.
But the.
But it's same in the.
Yeah,
Executive.
report. I don't know if Alex has voted on this one.
He just, he had his hand raised, now it's
Okay,
down.
so it's 5 in affirmative,
It's up now.
opposed.
I think we got, we got very, very much.
This is good because my next one was gonna be that we send it to third graders at PS9.
Okay, thank you. This has been complicated and difficult and long. And we still have December full board to get through with it, but I think having such a consensus has been very helpful. And I'd like to move right away to have some time left for Kevin's presentation on the budget.
Okay,
Kevin, I'm getting it up
okay.
right as we speak.
We're gonna go through the agenda tonight.
I don't think we'll have time, but we'll give some instructions for mailing it in. Ken?
I have an item of new business, if I could bring that up.
We still-
You could blow it up.
Yeah,
Can
probably.
we get the
Yeah.
the actual business done, and then we'll be
Yes.
sure we call
Yes.
on you.
You can close the side.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
There we go.
It'll open up, yeah.
Is that decent?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay,
perfect.
excellent.
It's perfect, media perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Go
So,
ahead.
Beverly asked me, to create a template for budget presentation at board meetings starting December 1st. So when I contacted a lot of you in September, when I was campaigning, one of the things I talked about was financial transparency. So I think it's incumbent upon us as board members to know the budget, to know where we get our funding from, where we spend our money, and what we have left over at the end of the budgeting period. So, as you know, our fiscal year goes from July 1st to June 30th of the following calendar year. So this is for fiscal year 2025. So, there are 3 categories, major categories. So personal services are mostly salaries for Alex, Max, and Jesse. Additionally, other than personal services are expenditures for equipment, supplies, etc. And then rent is the rent for the district office, plus Max, correct me if that also includes when we rent space for, oh, it doesn't, it goes in a different line item. So it's basically rent for the district office.
Just for here, yeah.
Yeah. So, as with any services organization, if you look at the pie chart, almost 2/3 of our budget, which is $432,000 for fiscal 25, is for salaries for the 3 staff members. Roughly 1/3 for rent, and the remainder are for supplies. And just to kind of give you a breakdown of our funding sources for 2025 fiscal year, the lion's share of our budget or our funding comes from the city with a $5,225 stipend from Gail Brewer's office. So as you can see, the first column is our budget, the second column is what we spent.
Max, is that, I
Yeah,
thought
you
the
need to-
5,000 was from Abreu?
Gail Brewer, that was in my notes.
Oh, sorry, it's, I forget the exact amounts, but Sean gave us more than Gail.
Okay.
But what may have been in the notes was that Gail gave us money for the first time ever.
Got it.
But Sean continues to give more.
Is it possible to move the columns over so we can see?
Yeah, can you
like,
center
how
it?
they-
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yep,
Thank you.
there we go, sorry.
Yeah.
So as you can, and so this is so the second column, expenditures year to date, this is the first 4 months of our fiscal year. We've spent roughly $195,000. Now, the thing that in the rent section, what's included, that's our full rent for fiscal year 2025. So that includes what we've spent, which is for the first 4 months, and our rent for this office is roughly $7,700 per month. Plus, the city gets complicated. They have what they call encumbered and pre-encumbered, and that's for the remainder of the fiscal year. So that's the $93,000. So based on that, we have roughly $237,000 left to spend for the remainder of the fiscal year.
That 43,000 for the remainder is pre-encumbered or not?
So for rent, it's that's just for whatever we want to use, so it's
No,
on it.
no.
No?
The $43,000 on the rent line that is not encumbered yet, we have no control over and cannot spend.
Okay,
It is sequestered by the city from because it's managed by the agency DCAS that does all the city rent provisions.
Yeah.
It's shown in our budget because it is to our benefit as part of our organization, but we have no control over the rent line at all.
I have a rent question.
yeah,
When this building was built, well, we were given this space as a condition of our approving what they built. I was under the impression all these years that we did not pay rent. Do you see the paper? Pay rent for being here because this was the deal. I don't know if we have any way of finding out when we started paying rent.
That ended a long time.
We did a deep dive into this sometime along a former district manager's tenure. They stopped paying the rent for a couple of years. That's what shifted us onto month to month. The landlord's actively trying to push us out still because of those actions from 4+ years ago. And now they're also deferring maintenance, which is why we have some budgetary issues coming up as well. But long ago, they started charging like some sort of rent, and this is what it's been that whole time.
As a commercial real estate question for you, are the utilities rent inclusive?
Yeah, so the utilities are included in that $7,700 a month mark.
And they bill you on a per square foot basis?
They don't bill us, they bill the city.
Right, they bill
You
the
don't even
city.
see it.
We don't even
And
get
they don't
paid
have
that
to
much like now.
Correct.
yeah.
Let's make a deal.
So,
I have a question.
yeah.
Is there a discretionary budget category that has some amount in it so that if you go over it, you can dip in discretionary in some sense in the budget? Or is it all specifically allocated to these categories only?
It's allocated to these categories, but between, I'm sorry, I'm speaking because I was an OMB.
Yeah.
She knows the budget better than anybody.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have freedom.
Yep.
To move money between, other than personal services and personal services,
Got
to
it.
meet our needs.
Got it.
Within the constraints that we have to leave enough in PS to pay the cost of the people we have, et cetera. But we do have flexibility to move money. Between what they call object codes.
Yep.
Which are different categories of spending, within those two categories. But again, it's subject to very tight controls on our PS budget to ensure that we do not overspend.
Yep.
On our staff.
Understood. All right, thanks.
So if you factor out the 43,140, we have roughly $194,000 left to spend for the remainder of the fiscal year, which ends June 30th, 2025. And as you can see, a lot of that is gonna go towards salaries. And what we spent so far year to date does not include the raises that were approved by the board last month. So if you were to, so I did some salary analysis, assuming when the city makes the raises effective. So if it's effective in November, then roughly we have
I think it's effective in mid to late November.
okay.
Right.
I can
So-
get that to you tomorrow, actually.
Yeah,
I think
actually, I
someone
ran
sent
some
me a memo
numbers.
about
So
his
we would
specific date.
roughly have a surplus, small surplus of a couple thousand.
On the PS
dollars
line.
On the PS line.
That'll help us for the meeting we're having on Wednesday. Yes, thank
Yeah.
God.
So I
Good.
did some back of the envelope math on that. We can talk about it. So-
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Firm that up.
So if we can go to, Max, if you could go to the second.
Yep.
The second tab.
Yes.
Right, so the second tab is just a comparison of our budget for fiscal 25, which is 432,000 versus last year, so. We were cut back by roughly 7%. But it's mine, so this 128,000, actually 178,000, again, we have no control over, that's all controlled by DCAS. And it's my understanding the 2023 budget included some funds that we got for a consultant. Beverly, you can speak more about that, but our budget.
Yeah, we had some expenditures in 2022 that did not hit by June 30th in terms of, final expenditure. And they allowed us to roll money from 22 to 23. So that's always a kind of one-time bump on the OTPS side. But it wasn't part of our base funding. It was for a specific item.
Right. And then the last, if you can go to the last worksheet. And this just is a comparison between what our budget was in 2024, fiscal 2024, which ended June 30th of this year, and what we actually spent. And actually there's some nuances going there, but the $96,000 is what was on the Crystal report, but it's actually not that, because it's the way the city does their accounting. But I just wanted to show a comparison.
And the vast majority of the surplus in fiscal 24 was on the rent line where we have no control.
Right.
So-
And that's the budget, and this is the template that I will present going forward, starting at our December.
Kudos.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
And if there are any suggestions for other things you want to see, I think you can get them together.
I think you answered this question, unless someone else was ahead of me. 7,700 monthly is our rent.
That's our rent, and
92.4 per annum.
93-ish, yeah.
Yeah, well, 92.4, but if it's 77, but
77.41.67
Oh,
to
okay,
be
got it.
exact. Yeah.
93, I stand corrected. So, but then, so the budget item was 178,000. So we're saying that we have no control over that because it's DCAS, and
Exactly.
there is a surplus, but we don't get the benefit of the surplus.
No, they
Correct.
Got it. Understood.
Adam.
I was just gonna say, at the December meeting, I think it might be helpful to present it without because the surplus doesn't mean anything. It may be helpful to have like Kevin adjust it or whatever, just to be
I
like,
can do that, that's
this is,
fine.
because I think trying to explain to
Yeah,
50 people,
I know.
DCAS is,
Again, I was just trying to. be
yeah,
fully
for us, I think
transparent.
it's helpful, but for I think everyone else, I think
Yes.
it's helpful to just be like, we have $8,000 to play with, essentially,
Yes.
for the rest of the year. 'Cause
Exactly.
That's the actionable thing that people need to know. If people see $40,000, they're gonna be like, well, let's
Let's.
get guinea pigs or something.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Let's get started. Yeah.
CFO.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Moving right along, we also have a presentation from Murat, who's been very busy. And I think this is really important work, so appreciate that it's even though it's late, we will, we will go through this because it's important.
I'll try to keep it pretty quick. I don't have like a formal PowerPoint or anything. I just wanted to talk to idea that we were discussing with the executives, but we want to push through an initiative to get basically a feedback survey to get feedback from everyone on the board about their experiences across a variety of themes. Just so that we could use that feedback to inform improvements to our board operations and culture and things of that nature. So basically, the structure that we've discussed for the survey would include 3 types of questions across a variety of categories. The 3 types of questions would be quantitative style questions that would be like on a scale from 1 to 5 or yes, no, or things like that, that would allow for a quick analysis of themes across groupings of board members. And then some more guiding qualitative type questions that are asking for more nuanced feedback about what has your experience been with this or that, or depending on the category. And then the third type of question would be like more open-ended, exploratory things where you could share your own ideas that don't particularly lead into what the other categories are asking. And this is to get a range of quickly, easy to analyze data to get insights on overall themes, specific guided questions to learn more about specific things that we're looking for, and then the open-ended exploratory questions to see what we're not even asking for that board members might have ideas about that we could incorporate. And those types of questions would be for use. All 3 types of questions would be used for each of the categories, which would cover things like board culture and engagement, the roles and responsibilities, committee operations and support, technology and communications. Procedures and processes and responsiveness to changing needs. And the reason we're pitching it right now to the steering committee is to get some initial feedback on if there's other categories that you may think we should include, if there's any like thoughts on the structure that we have presented, so that we could make those adjustments before moving forward of actually crafting the final survey. In the interest of time, I think it would be best to like send that feedback to me directly. But if anyone has any questions, please raise it.
Murat, you have a lovely written document that gives this detail, and I think perhaps it would be helpful for members of the steering committee if we sent that out for comment, maybe as a Google Doc, for them to then, incorporate any thoughts they had to you so that you can get it in an organized way. I think having that in front of folks may make it easier for them to provide input.
I figured I would send some type of follow-up to recent information, but that document already spells it out, so it makes more sense to just send that out.
It is beautiful.
So we'll follow up by sending that out to the members of the steering committee and asking for feedback as far as the structure and categories.
Is this gonna be like a Google form or something, or what's the format that we will eventually do that?
So most likely it'll be a Google form. I'm planning to meet with Max and some of the board office staff about working through what's feasible as far as best option going forward. But if you have feedback on that as well, share it.
Great.
Hopefully it won't take some time.
And I think it would be extremely helpful for to get some analysis of the data once we get it back. And be able to present that to the board with some recommendations as to what was in there, and what we found out, and what people's needs are, that they're willing to express in this kind of survey. I guess we have very little time before our December full board, because as Max suggested, we had a late full board because of the election in November. So it is imperative that we get information quickly on what you anticipate in your committees in the way of resolutions. Just to be able to prepare and a good agenda for the full board, and to get a bead on what's out there getting written as a resolution. So can I ask that by Friday at the latest, you get back to myself and Max a statement of what you are anticipating that you will have as an impact on the full board, and where you know it, what your December committee meetings or November, if they're still to come, are going to involve.
May I tag on?
Yeah.
And if you expect to have a resolution.
Yes.
Or do not, or don't.
Or don't, so it's a yes, no, that's a yes, no,
Right.
but if it's a yes, what is it?
Or maybe it's more than one resolution. Okay.
Right. And also just, I'm trying to encourage committees to do multi-month planning. So I think if, if you come, our meeting's tomorrow, we don't have a speaker, that's a very uncomfortable place to be. So I think our public, the community we serve, if we want to get them to attend our meetings, we better have regular meetings. So I just urge you to begin thinking multi-month in terms of how you wish to plan out your agendas. It gives you both, if something doesn't work out in the last minute, gives you a fallback, because you may be able to move up what you've planned for the next month. I just think it's a smart way to really make sure that we continue to be active and involved in the issues that our committee cares about. End of speech. Any new business? How did I know?
Funny you should ask. I just wanted to bring up, we all know that we lost Mark Diller as a member, which is a huge loss for the board, but the way it happened, I think should trouble all of us. And what happened. And I'm at least in the dark on one part of it, which I wanted to just bring out, which is, Mark is district manager of CB2, and apparently somebody challenged whether he could also be on CB7 at the same time. And he went to the conflict of interest board, which we are told tells us what we can and can't do and what the conflicts are. And they said there is no conflict.
Right.
And then whoever this person was, took it to another level.
I'm not sure it's the same person. I don't know that.
Okay,
I
well,
don't know the identity of where this originated.
you do know?
I do not know.
You don't know, okay. But it was taken by somebody to another level.
Mark has a good idea as to who it was, but
Okay,
didn't want to say.
okay. He told me he didn't want to know.
I think the issue was a disagreement between the conflict of interest board, where Mark had, he is blameless in this. He went to the conflict of interest board 2 years ago when he was interviewing for the position at Community Board 2, and was given a ruling that there was no conflict. What surfaced then was something different, which was a provision in the city charter that seems to read that, I don't have the language in front of me, but that in his situation, he could not belong to any community board as a member. I think it's very poorly drafted piece of legislation in the city charter, but there it is. And I think if you could have interpreted different ways, but the legal folks that exist in city government, the law department, apparently had a role in this interpretation and decided, contrary to what the conflicts of interest board had decided, that this was not possible. So that is what triggered this whole problem.
So it was the law department?
I believe it was the law department, maybe filtered through an attorney at the borough president's office.
Okay. You mean the final decision?
Yes.
Not not how it was brought to our attention.
No.
Right. The final, and I've read the statute and I'm not an attorney, but at best, it's very sloppily written in it. And I believe that the preamble to the sentences in question, take it out of context. The context was you can't, this is just Doug speaking.
No, it's many people, including myself.
Yeah, what the intention of that paragraph in that arcane city charter provision just simply meant you could not be a member of a board that you were also the district manager.
Yes, I think
Not that you can't, because it says any board, which would have meant a co-op board or an educational board, or
It was crazy.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are where we are, and I deeply regret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to Mark's great credit, he could have, he thinks he would have prevailed if he would have challenged this,
Yes.
but we all ran the risk of any vote that he took part in being invalidated.
Right.
So he,
Yeah.
Profile and courage.
No, he is absolutely that. Yes.
yeah,
And we will miss him. And maybe if we vote to support public members,
Could be one of them, yeah.
he could be one of them.
Yeah.
until the law department rules on that.
No, they're not gonna rule on that. None of their business.
We need a new charter revision committee.
That's
This
for the
would-
whole city of New
I was
York.
gonna say, this would be something actually worth fixing in the charter,
Yeah.
unlike the
Yeah, it's
crap we
really
just
poor.
voted on.
Poorly written,
Well, yeah.
very poorly written.
But, you know, the fact that it's in the charter means it would need a vote and a resolution and an election of the city of New York. So the likelihood of it getting changed is de minimis.
Always.
It's like a.
Anyway, thank you for bringing that up, and, I think we feel the same way.
It doesn't need to go.
All right, is there
Motion to
Shelley, a motion to